you?
Hello, how are you?
Right.
Just in case. All right, I'm gonna call the meeting back to order. Mr. Quick, you have the floor.
Yes, sir. Good evening, everyone. Glad to be back here tonight for our second work session. I'm going to try again to be brief yet thorough. We've got a lot of information to cover, and I'll be glad to cover as much information that you want to cover. I've put a little bit of a timeline together on kind of what we're going to look at tonight. We'll look at some amendments that have come out since last week's work session. We'll go through the budget memo and look at some more in-depth on the line-by-lines, just so you can get an idea of the hundreds and $200s and $1,000 changes that I don't really hit in the overall presentation. Go again over the Richmond County Public Schools budget request, as well as the carryover proposal, review of debt service once again, and a small look into the capital improvement plan. So I'll start with budget amendments. I put in front of each of you a list of budget amendments that are appearing in the budget after last week's meeting. Everything else is the same as the recommended budget, with the exception of these 4 or 5 items. First one I want to talk about is police cars through the sheriff's office. We were notified just this past week, and so it's kind of funny how this is happening, that we are not eligible this year for the grant funding that we've received in the past. The grant funding went elsewhere. The grant funding hadn't been very good over the last couple of years. If you remember, 6 or 7 years ago, it was a pretty true 50-50 grant. We bought a police car, took a loan out through USDA. The grant funding covered the second police car. And believe it or not, you're seeing this $100,000 number in front of you. 4 years ago, we were purchasing and outfitting 2 police cars for less than $60,000 a year. Hope and I had a meeting with the sheriff and lieutenant this past week talking about cars. And so what we're asking is that we move this year's budget for police cars. Right now the budget shows $70,000, move it to $100,000, and then offset that $100,000 by a $100,000 loan from USDA. So we can still get this 3.5% loan from USDA. There's no grant funding attached. So we have gone ahead in anticipation of that and put an additional $7,000 into the debt service line to be able to accommodate that loan. And I guess why do we take this loan? Really, you've got 3 options. Take the loan, don't take the loan, pay it out of the fund balance, or tell the sheriff's office, hey, we're sorry, 2 cars aren't in the budget this year. I don't think saying that's the right idea. We're trying to rotate this fleet every 5 or 6 years. The supply chain issues over the last couple of years have put us in a backlog a little bit. So I think that we need to stay on track with buying the 2 cars a year. I think that is unnecessary. Right now we're getting 4.5% interest on our money. So the money that we have in the bank, we're getting 4.5% interest on it through Union Bank and Trust. USDA is offering us this $100,000 for 5 years at 3.5%. So you take that, you pay the call it $20,000 a year on debt service on that out of the budget, as opposed to pulling it from the fund balance. So I'll stop there. At this point, before I stop there, I do want to go ahead and prime you on something. It is possible that the sheriff's office may come to you sooner than the start of the fiscal year to get this money appropriated. So it's not a guarantee at this point. Car demand is high, inventory is low. Sheriff's office thinks that there could be a possibility that 2 vehicles are available through the dealership that they've been dealing with later in April or May. If they're available, it's possible that they're going to come and say, hey, we'd really like to go ahead and advance this purchase because we have these, we have our name on them, we can get them tomorrow. If they don't take that opportunity, if the opportunity is there, it could be next year, this time, before their July 1 is filled. because we just last week received 2 Chevrolet Tahoes that were ordered last year that just came in now. So that's kind of the dilemma that they're facing right now on the supply chain. Believe it or not, the Tahoes these days are about the cheapest option. 5 or 6 years ago, they weren't. All vehicles, police packages, you've got to have the special police package. You can't just go get a Tahoe off the lot for liability reasons. All these vehicles are in that $40,000 range, whether you're talking about a Dodge Charger police car, Dodge Durango, Chevrolet Tahoe, Ford Explorer. The only manufacturer that's even producing cruisers anymore is the Dodge Charger. No more Tauruses. Chevrolet is not making a car, so the Charger is the only police sedan. Most everything is going to the SUVs these days. So, not asking you for that at this moment, but just if these vehicles are available in April and they can get their hands on them pretty soon and not have to wait on the supply chain, it's likely that they come and ask you to advance this FY24. So just keep that in the back of your mind for now. Second page of the amendments from last week are our smaller ones. We did increase $1,000 to the Middle Peninsula Northern Neck Community Services Board as requested by Supervisor Carr, taking that budget to $38,965, still under their requested amount. Their requested amount was $42,124. Increased $1,000 to CASA as requested by Supervisor Herbert, moving this contribution from $1,000 to $2,000, and increased $21,858 to Bay Transit as requested by Supervisor Thomas, and this will allow us to fund that second half of the second bus. Right now we're funding a bus and a half. We went to a bus and a half about 4 years ago. Bay Transit told you their need. Supervisor Thomas asked last month. We were able to finagle this in. How did we get here with the revenue? We just went through and just were able to look at a couple of lines a little bit differently. We increased court fines and forfeitures by $2,000. We increased $12,000 of revenue we receive annually from the compensation board for our constitutional officers. That budget came in last week from the state. The estimated numbers came in just a tad better than the recommended budget showed by about $18,000. So we were able to grab 12 there. Increased our EMS billing revenue up $5,000 from $400 to $405,000, and then increased our revenue based off of taking a USDA loan for the police cars by $35,000. That previously was in the budget at $65,000 for the grant/loan. Yes, sir. And then there are a couple other personnel things. So we went back into the county administrator's budget, and that's a budget that we've been trying to not hit much because we didn't want to do a whole lot with salaries in order to give y'all the flexibility. So we were able to cut a little bit more out of the salaries in the county admin budget based off of the transition. And so that's where we're matching up this revenue to meet those new expenses.
So you increased your vehicle by 30,000
Yes, sir.
in the budget, right? Or that loan,
Yes.
and you increased debt service by 78.
Yes.
Okay.
Bay Transit 21,858, CASA 1,000, CSB 1,000. Should come up to about $60,000, give or take.
That's what I'm.
Revenue side, 35 plus 5 is 40, 52, 54, and then we did some of those changes in the personnel on the admin side to balance it out. And what I mean I understand. When I say that is we were trying to keep between salary differences, we were trying to keep about $10,000 or $12,000 additional to provide the board flexibility when a position gets filled potentially in the future, to be able to have that salary in there. And that, we didn't want to cut it because we wanted that, but this year's budget is cutting and trimming in places that we don't want to cut and trim.
Okay, okay.
So that's where you match
That's where I was
up.
looking.
That's
yeah,
where,
what I
that's
was
where your
looking at.
balance is between those two things.
Why it wasn't balancing, exactly.
That's your
Okay.
balance between those two things.
Okay,
So every request that we had last week was included into the budget, balanced. Let's go to revenue shift. Supervisor Pemberton last week brought up a good question, and it got me thinking about things a little bit on my drive home. It was the revenue share that we had included $150,000 in the budget as revenue share payment from the Booker's Mill solar project. And Hope and I had talked about this for a while, and exactly how we were going to plan to get that revenue. Were we going to look at it off of a calendar year or off of a fiscal year? And so going into the budget last week, we had it planned as a calendar year, even though we didn't really like planning it as a calendar year. And you brought up that point of kind of how we're going to do that. So what we've done is we've made two shifts. They're revenue neutral. They both result in $255,000 of revenue. We've taken Booker's Mill revenue from $155,000 to $44,500. That accounts for 3 months of operation. So that would be prorated operation of April, May, and June of 2024 at about $15,000, a little under $15,000 a month. Then come July 1, we would get that site on a regular tax bill, just like your regular personal and real estate property taxes are. So get that on a regular tax bill. So moving that from 150 to 44.5. So then you're going to say, okay, well, how in the world did you replace that revenue? To offset that loss, we increased the revenue from interest on deposits. I just told you we're getting 4.5% interest on our money. The budget this year showed $105,000 of revenue. That revenue is actually going to probably be, should interest rates stay at 4.5% or greater, which is expected probably over at least the next 12 or 14 months, interest rates probably aren't going to go below 4.5%. If anything, they're going to start going up a little bit more and maybe even get up as close to 5%. So we've negotiated a lot with Union Bank over the last couple of months to make sure that our interest rate was reflective of what the market was. So the revenue from that interest is actually going to be more in the $215,000, $220,000 range. I didn't want to budget all of that in the initial budget because that's a revenue that next year as interest rates start dropping, it's a one-time revenue. It really is. It's a one-time revenue. However, what we're going to be able to do is we're just going to be able to balance out Booker's Mill and interest on deposits. Next year, when Booker's Mill is fully operational, we add that revenue from $44,500 up to the full amount of $175,000. We drop our interest on deposits from $210 down to $80 or $100. The revenue washes. Right. It just makes it a much cleaner number this year, a more representative number of what we can actually expect. Any questions on that?
Yeah. All right. The revenue from Booker's Mill is contingent on them being in operation. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And so if they were 6 months behind.
Yes, sir. If they're 6 months behind, then that $44,500 is not a safe revenue, but it's a whole lot safer than the $150,000 that we previously had budgeted.
Okay. All right.
So
okay.
they told you last week or 2 weeks ago they're looking at November. They're still on an aggressive timeline, and I think they even think it's a little bit aggressive, but they're looking at November of this year being online the first quarter of 2024.
Right.
So if they get online anytime January, February, and March, we're gravy on starting to collect that revenue for April, May, and June at that prorated rate for 3 months. And then we get into a full billing cycle for them effective July 1, and that'll be $177,800 based off of $1,400 per megawatt.
Gotcha.
And so interest on deposits, interest rate will probably start going down about that time. So obviously that revenue will start going down. So as one revenue's going up, one's going down, and they wash each other out in the end.
Okay. Good enough.
Will they be billed monthly?
They'll be billed yearly.
Just so it,
Yearly.
the second payment won't come in until December 5th.
We would sync it up with taxes.
Okay.
That's what Hope and I talked about the other day, is syncing up revenue share, because we've got 4 projects over the next 4 years that are going to be revenue share payers, that we're going to try to, all of them consistently, just sync them with the tax.
Right.
Sync them with taxes due in December.
Okay.
Are any immediate questions on those amendments at this time? If not, we can move over.
No, I'm gonna ask you a
Okay.
question.
All right,
How about these police cars?
okay.
We just got two.
Just got two.
If they come in here and buy two in April, what are they rotating them, every 4 years?
Five.
And, all right, in 5 years, we're gonna have 4 cars that they're gonna be hauling to replace. Unless we buy them in April and don't let them put them in service. Because you're gonna have a March car and an April car. And 5 years from now, all of them are gonna be,
But you've also got to remember, they're already, because of the delays over the last 2 years, because they were delayed on Dodge Chargers
right,
last year, they were delayed on.
but that still won't delay the replacement of them. Just because they got them late, they made the other ones go farther.
We just put them in there every 2 years, that's it. Two every year.
2 every year is what
I know, we've done it,
is what we've done.
Right,
but they're gonna come 1 year and ask for 4.
I asked for 4 because they got 4 worn out.
Seriously, I don't know if they're gonna come back to you this, in April.
I mean, I don't mind them getting them early, but I
Don't get everything in.
You gotta have some kind of space, get back on their rotation, instead of them putting them in.
I would rather you ask that question to Aaron Conkle, because he's the fleet manager. He would give you a much better answer on their rotation schedule than
Okay.
I can give you on their rotation schedule.
I'm just bringing that to everybody's attention that
You're right.
5 years from now, you're gonna have 4 war cars and we're trying to find money for 2.
Well, I mean, worst case scenario, if they didn't come back to you in April to say, hey, can we advance these for the next year? They could still order them July 1. It's possible, they've got 2 that they could get in July. It's possible that those 2 wait again until next March. So you could be in that same situation, even if you don't advance it. It's doubtful that if they don't act on something that they might have in the next month available to them,
Well, I
that a dealer
realize-
is gonna have them that soon.
I realize that, but I'm trying to come up with a plan that we don't end up somewhere down the road with 4 war police cars and them hauling for 4.
Right. If you'd like.
I mean, we went through it with the 2 pickups, and we had to go with a different route to get one of them, so I know the supply chain is terrible.
Right.
I just want, just be aware of,
But you know, it's funny we're talking about this, because I saw something on the news this day on business thing that said vehicle inventory was up to 41 days now. So I mean,
I think it's getting better.
it's getting better all the time, so
okay,
do
that's,
what you can.
All right, let's move to the budget memo that I sent to you a couple weeks ago. And I'm going to try to get through this. Can we go to expenses first? And go down to, we start with our general overview and salary. So we told you last week, we're looking at the 5% raise for full-time staff effective July 1st. Pension plans, insurance increased by 3.5%. So we're looking at a total additional personnel cost of $574,000. Includes new positions in the sheriff's office, dispatch, animal control officer, and the SRO grant from the previous year, just getting it into the budget. So those 4 new positions are a part of that $574,000. And I'm just going to go until you stop me. Professional services under the Board of Supervisors increased that by $3,845. Designated and reserved operating funds, so this is our debt service and our capital improvement plan we talked about last week. The $261,000 early debt payoff plan that we did for FY23, removing that $261,000, but bringing back into that $116,600 from the general fund to be able to pay the FY24 debt on the Coggin building. Not something I love, not something I prefer, but bringing money out of the general fund to pay a designated specific use that you know clearly is something that is manageable. Again, added back in that $87,000 in annual debt for the land purchased on Route 3. Took that out of the budget last year, our mistake. We had a signed contract on that piece of property that should have sold, didn't sell, we're still paying on it. So there you'll see the increased debt service was amended, so anything you see in red is anything that's been amended since last week. Increased debt service by that 7806 to accommodate the greater loan from USDA. Decrease of $64,000 to the capital improvement plan, and then making that $64,000 contingent in October on personal property values not dropping the full 18.5% that we're using as a projection. The personal property rates and total valuation drops less than 17%. That $64,000 at the board's discretion could be supplemented back into the budget mid-year for those items that we've identified as contingency. County admin, no major changes. Again, we've reworked salaries to a small degree to reflect changes, but we still have a little bit of flexibility in filling vacant positions in the future. A couple of changes to IT, $3,000 professional services, $2,000 maintenance service contracts, $3,000 to postal services. No changes in the commissioner's office, no changes with the assessor. However, next year I'd be prepared to increase that assessor line by probably $20,000 or $25,000 as we get ready for the 2028 general reassessment, which is probably going to cost you close to $200,000 as opposed to the $120,000 that we're paying now. So it's probably a good idea to go ahead and start thinking about getting more money into that savings for 2028. No changes with treasurer, electoral board, or voter registrar. Circuit Court, increase of $2,987. This is the judge's secretary that we split with the other two counties, Lancaster and Northumberland. This is just an estimation based off the current amount we're paying, $31,500 to accommodate. Now again, this $31,500 is split three ways. This does not mean the position is paying $92,500. This is salary, benefits, health insurance, office supplies, all in for that office. So that office's total budget's about $90,000 between the three counties. We did decrease $1,000 to court-appointed attorneys. We've been decreasing $1,000 here and there over the last several years because the need hasn't been used. No changes on page 16 to the magistrate. Fairly substantial increase to juvenile detention expenses from $11,711 to $29,161. We're a member of the Middle Peninsula Juvenile Detention Facility. What we pay is based off of a rolling 5-year average. So we changed that a couple of years ago. We've talked about this in the past. It used to be you paid what your expenses were. We've got a current per diem of about $290 a day is what it costs per child. And so that means if we had years that we've had in the last couple of years with children being in this facility, we could have a bill somewhere around $70,000 to $80,000 a year that we're not planned for. That was giving the counties a lot of heartache, so we went to a rolling 5-year average. Last 2 years have been big hits to us with children in this system. We're starting to see the results of that in what we pay. So as a result of the 5-year average, we see later our costs, but we also don't see good years until later as well. It's a good scenario for us. But anyway, that's increasing, and I would anticipate another increase to this next year of a similar amount based off of the data through FY23 on child days.
Where are we in that 5-year average, or is it
It
rolls every year
So the last
for the
2
previous
years,
5?
so the last 2 years, we've had about 200 to 250 child days per year. Our average prior to that was about 30 per year. So when you have 5 years of 30, our budget was about $4,000 2 years ago. And then you put a year of 250, you lose a year of 30. And you put another year of 250, you lose another year of 30. So your average continues to go up.
Okay.
And for the 3rd year in a row this year, our number's already above average. And this is children committed to this facility from the courts. It's the juvenile jail. Decreased telecommunications in this budget by $800 based off of audited expenses we've seen. Several requests from the clerk of the circuit court. We've increased $500 to her auditor, increased $785 to maintenance service contracts, $100 to printing, $250 to travel, $750 to office supplies, and then an increase of $20,136 to books and subscriptions from $45 to $65,136. Sherry told you last week about the grant she receives. Last year, that grant for the reclamation of those old will and deed books was $45,000. She's been awarded already for next year, that's $65,000. So that $65,000 expense is balanced out by $65,000 revenue on the revenue side of the budget. Yes, sir.
So it's a wash.
That is, yes, sir. Did increase $2,000 in the Commonwealth's attorney's budget to the assistant Commonwealth's attorney. That's a line that over the years, you remember we put this in the budget about 3 or 4 years ago based off of the body cameras. There was a code section that came out that said we had to fund an assistant Commonwealth's attorney based off the amount of body cameras that the county had. We put $20,000 into this budget. Denise would know better than I. We probably haven't spent over $5,000 in any year at this point. Current to this date, I think last year was zero. And this year, I know that the Commonwealth's attorney has brought on a new person to do some part-time work with her. So I think you'll start seeing this money get used a little bit in this line item, but we have brought that down $2,000. Sheriff's Office salaries. This is the dispatchers. Hiring 2 new dispatchers effective December 1, 2023, and fully funding the 2 dispatch positions that were approved in the FY23 budget that we approved effective March of this year in the current year's budget. I know that the sheriff has filled one of those positions to date for the dispatcher. He's got 3 more to go, with 2 positions coming in December based off of this budget. And then SRO, grant-funded position, came in last year, just didn't get into the budget based off of when that grant was awarded. And then the amendment to the motor vehicles increased from 60 to 70 in the recommended budget, and then moved it to 100,000 in this amended budget. Increase of $4,000 in professional services for E911. This is our payment annually to King and Queen County for the radio system that could and should over the next year or so, as we're able to put this new tower infrastructure up, become a full member of the Upper Middle Peninsula Regional Radio Authority. That $46,000 rental payment or subscriber payment should go down to $15,000 or $20,000 as a member payment. So there should be some budgetary savings there over the next year, so maybe as early as next year. And then $1,000 to maintenance. Ambulance and rescue, increase of $5,000 to the holiday wages. We pay holiday wages to all of our providers, increasing that from $13,000 to $18,000. This would move our holiday pay for each provider from $1,000 annually to $1,500 annually. By paying holiday pay to our providers, we do not pay overtime rates on holidays. This amount has not been recalculated since we did our salary realignment for FY22 and FY23. And so this is an annual stipend paid to all of our providers to work holidays. Holidays are worked based off of however the schedule rolls. Our providers like how we pay holiday pay as opposed to overtime. The numbers really work out to be about the same. If we didn't do the holiday pay, the overtime would be $18,000 higher. So that's the only change in EMS. Fire department level funding as requested for the operations of the department in the amount of $105,000. Increase of $10,000 to the fire truck fund as they requested from 45 to 55. Increased 11.5 to fire programs. It's state money that we receive. So this is a $30,000 line item now, or $31,000 line item now that you'll see on the revenue side of the budget. It's also $31,000. So state money comes to the county, we give it to the fire department as required. And then we did increase fuel to the fire department. Last year, we for the first time started paying the fuel for the fire department. We threw a number at it of $3,000. based off of numbers I'm seeing so far through FY23, that number's going to be probably closer to $4,000. So did put another $1,000 in there. No changes to the jail. Small change in the juvenile group home. This is a Rappahannock office on youth of $625. No changes with building inspections. Animal control, this is, does include the new ACO shelter manager effective April 1 of this year, so that is represented in the budget. Medical examiner, no changes. Civil defense, no changes. Street lights, no changes. Refuse collection, we've talked enough about this. $200,000 increase to solid waste from $630,000 to $830,000 based on our new contract amounts. We submitted to Waste Management just this past month the contract, so should have that signed between both parties in the next week or two. Only change in general properties is a decrease of $10,000 payment to the IDA rent. For about the past 6 or 7 years, the county and the school board, we came up with a very simple agreement that each entity would pay $10,000 per year to the IDA checking account, really to keep the lights on. Because at one time when we had Verizon in that building, we were adding money into that budget every year. That checking account was doing well. All of the bills were being paid for. Well, now the only tenants of that building are the Head Start program that pays $1,800 a month, the county's middle section of storage, and the school board on the back. So we came up with an agreement to each pay $10,000 a year just to put into this account, just to help with things like HVAC, water and sewer, and electricity. And so for the year, I've recommended for both the county and the school board that we go a year without making that $10,000 payment. Our checking account at the IDA is in good shape. We've got close to $75,000 in that account, more than sufficient to pay monthly expenses. And so that $10,000 would need to get back into the budget next year. Again, it's just one of those areas trying to find for the year. And so that would be a $20,000 reduction to that account this year from the county and from the school board. Local health services, this is our $12,500 increase to Three Rivers based off of the JLARC standard adopted several years ago. This is your last large increase to the health department from the last 3 years. Last 3 years, you've contributed new money of almost $38,000 to the health department. Increases from here on out should be your yearly maintenance efforts of 2 or 3%. Level funding to both the free health clinics. Community Services Board, we talked about the CSB adding $1,000 to get them to $38,965. No changes with the Department of Social Services regarding local funding, proposed to remain flat at $347,000. Did include a small increase of about $28,000 to their state and federal funding expense as well as revenue. CSA, this one hurts me, cutting from $450,000 to $375,000. We had done so well over the years, getting this budget to a really safe spot, because as you know, this is a cost that you're going to pay no matter what. These are your at-risk youth, autistic, nonverbal, foster children, students that can't be managed in the public school environment, need to go to special day treatments. I give the school credit every year. They do not use this as a catch-all. The school system is good about trying to manage all the children that they can manage with the resources we have within that school division. They just don't kick a bad student and say, hey, they've got to go here. So they try very hard to limit these expenses to the greatest extent possible. You will see our historical averages there, so that 375 number that we're going to, I believe, is a safe number for the year. Just keep an eye on it. We just need to keep an eye on it over the next couple of years. Increase of $240,000, $240 to Bay Aging. They would really like $240. $240 to Bay Aging as requested. Let's skip the public schools. We'll come back to them separately in a minute. Rappahannock Community College increase of $334 as they requested. No changes to our recreational programs, YMCA, Little League, and youth football. No changes to our museum. Local contribution remains steady at $4,000. Increase to the public library as requested to $109,000. This is your first increase to the library in 3 years. For the last 3 years, they've been at level funding at that 103 number. So this is the first request that the library has come to you in the last couple of years.
We all meet in the state.
Yes, sir. This will meet. This will meet, and I think we probably would have met the state requirement even if we hadn't made this amendment. But they count our 109, and then I think the town of Warsaw gives them 5,000 or 8,000. So their local government per capita hits the state minimum. No changes in our planning budget. Economic development, another one that I don't love, decreased $7,500 to economic development. We have $7,500 that we budgeted over the last couple of years, just kind of as a catch-all for economic development. It could be advertising, it could be a certain program. The last couple of years, we've just kind of saved it in our capital improvement plan, so recommending that we remove that from the budget this year. It doesn't give me a whole lot of concern because in your siting agreements that you have over the next 3 or 4 years of some of these projects, you dedicated between $500,000 and $600,000 of that one-time money purely for economic development when that money comes, and you'll have that ability to deploy those bigger dollars for economic development at that time. Level funding to the Tourism Commission, level funding to Menokin, $1,500. Menokin did request $2,500, so I'll try to point out when somebody requested more. So Menokin's request was $2,500. Recommendation is level funding of $1,500. Level funding to both the Planning District Commission and the Environmental Grant Match, Soil and Water Conservation District, level funding 15 is requested. Cooperative extension, Richard, I've told you right and I've told you wrong. So the extension budget this year, it balances out since I told him right and I told him wrong. The extension budget this year, they asked for right at $48,000, an increase of about $6,700. My recommendation is to increase them to $43,000. And what the extension budget does, this budget funds 4 positions. Partial, if you see, if you look in your board pack and you look in the request from Wendy Herdman, this local funding supports a portion of the Westmoreland County Extension Agent's salary, a portion of the Lancaster's Extension Agent, a portion of the 4-H agent, and a portion of the Richmond County agent that hasn't been filled part-time or full-time probably in at least 4 years. So that's where that $43,000 is going. I went back through their budget. They asked for $48,000. They had a lot added to benefits, a lot more than we add to benefits. When I do benefit calculations, I use 22%, sometimes 23%, depending on what it is, based off of VRS, FICA, Social Security, and Group Life. Their number was more like 36%. So I brought that number down to the 22, 23 that we use. That fully funds at $43,000. Those 4 positions, the portion that we pay of those 4 positions, and if Richmond County remains without an agent, we don't pay that money. So we're not paying the extension every month. They're submitting us an invoice on a quarterly basis that Denise pays based off of what their staffing looks like. So if they continue to go without a Richmond County agent, we won't pay our portion. It just goes back into the fund balance or goes to level out somewhere else that's overspent. I know that there was a meeting last week. There's a new president or chief or whatever you want to call it, executive director of the Virginia Extension. There was a meeting in Gloucester. I know several of us, I know Mr. Thomas was there, expressed the need that Richmond County be staffed as we need to be staffed. I believe the state's got it funded. We've got it funded. I don't know that they put a huge emphasis on staffing that position in the last couple of years. Should they do it, we're funded for them to do it. Miscellaneous and contingencies, level funding to legal aid as requested, $2,467. Level funding to Healthy Harvest Food Bank at $2,800. They have asked you for $10,000. Level funding to the Rappahannock River Basin Commission of $1,000 is requested. The increase to Bay Transit, initially there was a $1,901 increase to Bay Transit. Since that time, it's now a $21,858 increase on top of that 1901, so almost $24,000 for the year to get to that second bus. Increase of $500 to the Haven as requested. Level funding to the 4th of July fireworks, to the RHS After Prom, to the Main Street program, to Warsaw Fest. We did amend or have included an amendment to increase CASA from $1,000 to $2,000. Level funding to Bay Workforce. Increase of $500 to Warsaw Richmond County Chamber of Commerce. Level funding to the Northern Nick Drug Court. Those are every change in your budget with the exception of personnel. The personnel numbers, I just highlight them at the beginning at that increase of $574,000 between all the categories combined. Everything else in this memo, if you go to your actual budget spreadsheet, should be reflective of what's in this memo on the expense side. Questions before we look at revenue? Let's go down.
One question.
Yes.
I don't know if we even know the answer. Do we know if the drug court is working?
Yes.
Okay.
We got a good report on it at the jail board last month.
Okay.
It was last month or 2 months ago.
Last month, I think.
We got a good report on it. I want to say we've had 2 Richmond County successes just this past year.
Okay.
You remember him saying that? Brian Seaman?
Libby said it.
Libby said it. Libby
Okay.
said it in her budget presentation that we'd had 2 recent
Okay.
Richmond County
I missed that.
graduations.
Okay. Yes, okay, that's right, okay.
But we also did hear some information on it because it's run through the regional jail, through
Okay.
the community probation and parole.
Okay.
Let's go down to, all the way down until we get into the pages. Okay. Revenue from local sources. These are our main areas of local revenue that we have the control over. Real property taxes increase of $122,000 in this budget. This is anticipating a total real value increase of the year of about 1.4%. I told you that the last 2 years have been 1.97% and 1.72%, all based off of new construction, and our new construction values for the year are very much in line with what they've been the last 24 months. I think the 1.4% value projection is pretty safe, and then that budgets this revenue at 97%, which is on the high end of where I want to be in the real estate budget. I'd rather be in that 96.5% budgeted. Hopefully that 1.4% will come in more like 1.75% in the fall. That 97% number will then drop down to about 96.5%. Public Service Corporation decreased this $15,000 of revenue, and this is really based off of your assessments where they stand right now based off of our ratio. The SCC assesses the Public Service Corporations annually based off of the county's most recent ratio study. Commissioner of Revenue told you last month that study, I believe, is about 73% right now. So your homes are selling for, 27% more than the assessed value. Inverted number, you would think at 73%, they're selling at 73%. You're actually selling at 127% higher than your assessed value. That's what's leading us to tell you that you're looking at a 20 to 25% increase in values next year based off of that ratio. Personal property taxes increase of $118,000. Although our projections are based on an overall decrease in value for FY24 of approximately 18.5%, this increased revenue comes from increasing our percent budgeted from 90 to 95%. We are anticipating PPTRA rates will return to normal this year, meaning no additional credit will be given based off of the data showing that these used vehicles are dropping 20 to 25%. Moving to 90 to 95% on our budgeted revenue, again, I don't like it. The highest I really want to be in budgeting for that revenue is about 92, 93% on the very high end. 6 years ago, when we were really doing well and putting money away, personal property was one of our main areas of putting money away. We were budgeted about 82, 83%. So if you were collecting $1 million, we were budgeting $820,000. You were budgeting $2 million, what's 820 times 2? 1640. You know, so that's where we were able to gain that cash 4 or 5 years ago. I'm comfortable with this 95% number because our collections are good. When you go through the last 5 or 6 years of collections from the treasurer's office, we're at 100% collected. So we're collecting our revenue. Our treasurer, between current year and delinquent year numbers, the lowest I think we've been over the last 5 years in collection years, 99.7% collected, up as high as 102% collected based off of delinquent numbers. No changes to mobile home taxes, increase of $8,000 in M&T from 45 to 53, increase in 14,000 to merchants capital from 81 to 95. No changes to penalties or interest. Smaller increase this year to local sales tax, only increasing from by 25,000 from 1,675,000 to 1.7. We put a big jump on this last year. Last year we went from 1.5 to 1.675. Numbers still supported at this 1.7 range. Again, getting a little bit higher than I want to be, as is kind of the case with a lot of things this year on the expense and revenue side. No changes on utility tax. No changes to motor vehicle license tax, $264,000. That's your sticker tax. Increase of $10,000 on records and wills from 80 to 90. Gross receipt, utility tax, no changes. No changes on animal license, no changes on transfers. We have increased building permits by $10,000 from $50,000 to $60,000, and we have made a $35,000 increase from $25,000 to $60,000 on land development fees. This could go up a little bit more. It's kind of like interest on deposits. It's a one-time money. We're getting permits from the solar facilities. Just for example, what type of permits have we gotten from solar facilities? The Hemmings project, I think we got a $40,000-ish payment for a building permit for an electrical fee. Now, the projects that are owned by Dominion Energy do not have to get building permits. They're exempt from the state code of getting building permits. It would be nice if they weren't. But still, the 2 Booker's Mill projects, because we permitted them in 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1, I believe, was $81,000 or $82,000. Phase 2 was about $100,000. So just in that project alone, $180,000. I'm budgeting a little bit of that for next year, but I'm not budgeting it all because, number one, we don't know when those permits are going to come in. They're one-time monies. They're great to get, but you don't want to bank your budget on saying, okay, we're going to get $200,000 in permit fees. Well, you might get $200,000 next year in permit fees. Well, the following year, you're going to go back to $35,000. So we've captured a little bit of that revenue to make numbers work, but just a small portion of it. Other permits and fees, no changes. Increase to revenue from local sources on court fines and forfeitures, an increase of $7,000 from 35 to 42. This is one of those places where I added another $2,000 this past week to help make numbers work with the changes. Revenue from local sources, interest on deposits. You'll see at the top, the initial increase was for $85,000. Last year, our budget was $20,000 on interest on deposits. And we were struggling to get $20,000 on deposits a year and a half ago when rates were less than 50 basis points. The last 3 months alone, we've earned about $75,000 in interest. Now, you've got to understand, we're the richest we'll ever be in December, January, February because of taxes. So that number will go down slightly, but we had moved it up to that 105 number. We've amended it up to the 210,500 number based off of the conversation we had a little while ago. That number will likely need to drop about $100,000 next year, and then the revenue share can go up that $100,000, just using round numbers to balance those out, but I think we have safer and more comfortable numbers like that. Revenue from property lease increased $4,000. This is the farm lease that we removed. We removed $4,000 in revenue from 30 acres that we were under contract to sell. remove that as a revenue, placing that back in as a revenue this year. Courthouse security fees, increase of $6,000. No changes to revenue from local sources on expenditure refunds, miscellaneous, or court services. These are all reimbursable expenses that we get throughout the year on different things. Revenue from the Commonwealth, payment in lieu of taxes, page 61, no changes. There's no revenue there. That used to be a revenue from Haynesville Correctional Center. You used to get between $30,000 and $40,000 a year from the state of Virginia as a PILT payment. That ended in 2010 or 2011 during the recession. There's been a push at the local government level to get that back in the state budget over the last couple of years. State hasn't agreed to do so. And it only affects about 11 counties, because the only way you can get a PILT payment from your correctional facilities is if the total value of that facility is 3% or greater than the total value of your entire taxable. So it's very confusing. But there's only about 11 counties in the state that are eligible for that PILT payment. So it's all small counties that have a really big prison and a really small tax base. No changes on page 62. Page 63 is our revenue for our constitutional officers. You'll see totally about $182,000 of increases between this revenue. This is revenue that the state provides for the 5% raises that go to our state-supported local employees, our 5 constitutional officers, as well as the registrar and the electoral board. This number is bigger than it's been in the past. Last year's budget on this was very conservative because we didn't know what the state was going to do. Last year we were able to be very conservative on state revenue from the comp board, so it's benefiting us this year to be able to grab more revenue because of how conservative we were last year. Ultimately, all in, it's about $182,000 of increase between those 5 departments. Our salaries, all the expenses of those departments remain well above what the state minimum is. Revenue from the Commonwealth, $27,000 increase to public assistance. That's the social services revenue we talked about earlier. Decreasing about $52,000 revenue to the Children's Services Act. That's accounting for the 70-30 split between how that's funded and moving that money out of a revenue. Decrease to other state school aid by almost $1.1 million. Again, this decrease is due to the fact that about $1.4 million of one-time school construction funds have been removed from the budget. They were a one-time FY23 revenue that is currently coming in on a monthly basis to the tune of about $128,000 per month. So when you shake out everything with the school budget, their actual state increase is approximately $400,000. We can get into the schools here in a minute. Increase in the school SRO funding by $55,000. This is adding that grant into the budget for FY24. Increase the fire programs fund by $11,500. This is that balance out between the fire departments, $31,000, just moving that from $19,500 to $31,000. Increase the circuit court clerks grant by that $20,136. Increase the USDA police car loan, amended at this point to $100,000, up from last year's number of $56,000. Really just a loan at this point, no grant for this year.
Morgan, before
Yes,
you
sir.
go off of that page, the SRO loan grant,
Grant.
is that a one-time thing that we're gonna have to pick up next year, or is that a ongoing, or is it that sunset grant that we got for the first group of them?
Maybe. So they haven't, no. So when that grant came out in 2012, that Dougie Bryant and I worked on, when that came out in 2012, it was stipulated at that time, it was a 4-year sunset. 100, 75, 50, 25, 0 of state funding. The state has not stipulated that this time. They're asking us to reapply for this grant every year. When we did it in 2012 or 2013, it was a one-time for 4 years. Based off of funding and based off of applications that they're getting, it could be different percentages every year. This year's budget is based off of, it's still based off of 75% state, 25% local. So I've stepped it down this year. It's possible it could be 100% state funded again. I haven't bet on that. but there's no guarantee that it's going to continue to step down like it did 10 years ago. It may not. I would say this, I'm safe to say that at some point in time, there will be no state funding in this position, and it will be 100% local funding. When that time comes, I don't know. They're going to play it case by case each year based off the funding from the General Assembly, based off the applications they receive from local governments.
Thank you.
Communications tax, a pretty large decrease in revenue here from 275 to 245. This is the tax that has been dropping pretty substantially every year. This is a state tax that comes to us, and my understanding is it's based off of landlines. So it's a landline type tax that comes back to the local governments from phone bills, and obviously landlines going way down is severely decreasing this revenue. However, the E911 tax on cell phones does continue to go up a little bit. So I don't know if it's fully offset at this point, but those two things are trying to balance each other out a little bit. And then our last page, let's go to federal government money, federal aid, increase of $92,000 to federal school funds, and then other non-revenue receipts. Increase to other school funds of $54,470. Increase to the forestry fund of $2,200. That's that new fund that we received payment for this past year for the first year. That's for our land use, property, and timber as a percentage of what the state has. Hopefully that number will go up over the years. Hopefully we've talked enough about what we've done with the revenue share, moving that back from 150 to 44.5. Increased EMS billing from 400 to 405, actually from 340 to 405. VPSA debt service refund of $15,000, an increase. That's the debt service that the Virginia Public School Authority through VRA refunded 3 years ago when interest rates were at an all-time low. This is based off of our 2012 VPSA loan for school construction. Over the course of the rest of that loan, I believe that refunding is going to save the county about $300,000 in total. We didn't initiate any of that. That was all done through VRA and VPSA. We're just the beneficiary of a little bit of savings there. And then the undesignated reserve decreased that, but again, it's a little bit funny because we've decreased it $261,000 from our early debt payoff plan of FY23. But we've got $116,600 in here for the Coggin debt, and we've got $100,000 in here as the carryover portion being placed towards the Richmond County Public Schools for FY24 as a contingency that we can talk a little bit about here in a minute, just to make sure everybody's understanding of that. So that's your revenue, that's your expenses in pretty high level detail. Fairly brief period of time. Questions at this point? Do you understand?
That's all I
They got it, brother. They got it. All right, we can go back to anything we need to, but let's click over to the review of the RCPS budget request and carryover. You heard from the school superintendent 2 weeks ago. Additional revenue from the state, $398,678. An additional $147,095 in federal other funds. Local funds requested $285,000. Recurring contributions in schools for FY23, $5,071,727. Requested contribution, $5,356,727 for a total of $830,000. Notable expenses from the FY24 presented to you: salary improvements plus benefits, $689,329, 5% raise to all employees effective July 1, 2023.
That's all teachers, everybody, all y'all's employees, 100%.
All in, support staff, cafeteria,
Janitors, all,
bus drivers,
okay.
paras.
Everyone.
Health insurance, schools and the county, we are combined on our health insurance. It's a good thing and it's a bad thing, just depends on what year it is. But overall, this past year, we saw a 3.5% increase here. I think I told you last week, much of this 3.5% increase is driven not from our experience this past year. It's being driven from a formula change at the state level based off of the way that they're viewing an individual pool's performance versus the state pool's performance. They're giving a heavier weight to the state starting this year. The state has had worse experience over the last year or two than we have. So ultimately, we're seeing the negative effect of that. However, there could be a positive in this change in the next couple of years. If we were to see a really bad year ourselves and the state were to see a good year, we could have a really bad year locally, but potentially see a 0% change to a decrease. Doubtful you see a decrease happening. But you could see a 0% change on a bad year because of this new formula. So it's bad for us this year, could be good for us in the future. And then $110,000 utilities regional program supplies, total addition. Local funds requested $285,000, current contribution $5,071, recommended contribution for FY24 $5,271,727, $200,000 of the $285,000, of which, a little bit funny, $100,000 is in the budget and $100,000 is in the contingency that we'll go over in a second from the FY23 RCPS carryover fund. So let's talk about this carryover fund and this contingency again. We still have state budget amendments in play at the General Assembly. It's unlikely that any budget amendments will be approved by the General Assembly prior to later this fiscal year, as late as June of 2023. We are hopeful these amendments will increase state funding to RCPS, and this $100,000 fund balance will not be needed. Provided additional state funding does come through, and it is at least $100,000 of additional funding, this $100,000 will not be appropriated or used for budget purposes. So state money comes in, satisfies this $100,000. This contingency never happened. It just stays where it is currently, which would be your fund balance.
So that would be,
Or the school CIP, just depending, because the recommendation is to split the 100,000.
so you're right, okay, so they would get an extra 50, and we would get our 50.
Correct, if we don't use it.
If not.
If we don't use it. So the $100,000, if we use it, will come from the FY23 carryover split. We have our split agreement with the schools in which we split 50-50 of year-end funds, meaning that $50,000 would come from the RCPS portion, $50,000 would come from the county portion. This $100,000 would not be part of the monthly appropriation. Every month you appropriate $1.6 million to the school division. So this $100,000 would not be considered in that $1.6 million monthly appropriation. The schools would be required to come back before the board next year, no earlier than March of 2024, explaining the need to have this $100,000 appropriated. Should explanation concur with discussions had during the budget process, the $100,000 will not be unreasonably withheld. What that means, they come to you in March of 2024, we're short this 100 like we said we would be, salaries, regional programs, health insurance, whatever, is part of the budget, board would appropriate that $100,000. They come to you in March of next year, and they say, hey, we want to buy a $100,000 drone to be able to go to the moon. That was not part of the budget discussions. The $100,000 would be withheld. That's just kind of an example of what that intent is. And then this is a one-time event, shall not be considered for the FY25 budget unless, of course, discussions are had and approved by the board. Questions for me or the school superintendent?
Well, I got a question for either Whitney or Dr. Davis. Since the state has not presented their budget, we don't have any clue what the state will give us. When y'all are doing your budget, what do you include, or do you include $0 in that from the state, or do you use last year's figure in hopes of this year being better or worse? But
So they do give us a couple of tools to use. They just, this year's kind of been an off year and they're not the most accurate tools. On top of the count tool error that happened, and that was a DOE error, but it's costing the state money. I know all of you have heard about that on the news. So I have their calc tools that I use. They're just not as accurate as they typically are. And that's what I've used to base our state funding.
now, when you say they're not as accurate, do you find them, and you might not be able to answer this, but do you find them not as accurate on the low end or the high end? Or what, you know, if they're not that accurate, are you finding that the formula gives you more than you really expect, or less than what you're expecting?
That's a great question. It kind of depends on which calc tool you look at. Whether you look at the budget that the governor approved last June. If you look at his amended chapter 2, they've also given us another document this year that is completely different from what we typically see from DOE as state numbers, and trying to really decide what does that mean for us and what line items does that really reflect. And their projections of ADM have been kind of all over the place for us. If I remember correctly, so please don't quote me, but I believe the governor's budget from June, the adopted budget, had FY24 projecting at $1,244 for an ADM. The House Bill 1400 came out, and that had us projected at $1,296, $1,292. So that's a big swing in students. And I'm projecting the $1,258, which I think is probably a little aggressive, but again, in our discussions of trying to make some numbers work and trying to get us to certain places in this budget, Morgan and I had conversations to agree to that. But I guess to answer your question, depends on which one you look at. Some of them project a lot more, and some of them project a little bit less. So I don't know that I really have a good answer.
Well, you answered as well as you could, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Because I just, you know, when I've been going over this budget stuff, I'm, you know, how y'all even come up with a budget without the main figure coming in
And
is
normal
baffling.
years, it's pretty easy. You have, you know, the governor comes out with his amended budget in December, then you get your House and Senate crossover budgets, and you can kind of have a good idea of how things feel and where we're going to come in, any technical changes that happen. You can have a pretty decent idea of where things are going. But this year just is an anomaly and just doesn't seem to fit into that nice little routine.
Thank you.
And you've got to remember, there is a budget adopted at the state level. The state does a 2-year budget cycle. We do a 1-year budget cycle. But the budget that was adopted last June by and ultimately signed by the governor was the FY23 and FY24 budgets for the state. What's being considered at this point is budget amendments from the General Assembly and from the governor based off of additional revenue calculations for the following year. They go in and adjust the budget. That's where we're at this point. If they don't do anything else, the state has a budget, and that's what a lot of the people are saying is, hey, why do we keep having these conversations? Well, the state has a budget, but they're also fighting over about $1.5 billion that the Democrats want to give to education and mental health. Republicans want to give in tax breaks. So how do we deploy that $1 billion? I think they're gonna end up coming in the middle somewhere on tax breaks and education and mental health and public safety, but it's potential later this year.
Can I ask one question? When will your ADM number be secured? I mean, when,
So March 31st is the date that the number goes by. We typically don't have that firm number by the time all the folks do the good work that they do. We don't typically get that number until mid-April.
and so you're saying that 1244 to 1296 number, 92 number, is that this current year or next year?
No, those were projected by the state for FY24. So those wouldn't be until March 31st of 2024.
Next year, okay. What is it this year, roughly? Roughly?
Roughly, I'm guessing we're gonna be somewhere between 1250 and 1260.
Okay, thank you.
The budget this year is based on 1245.
Right.
Yes.
FY23
Budgeted
budget's on
based
1245. That's where we've done a good job over the last years, kind of like what we were talking about personal property. We've been very conservative on ADM until the last couple of years.
I understand.
And this is, again, just kind of a result similar to cutting CSA, taking higher percentages on real estate, taking higher percentages on personal property, taking a higher percentage on enrollment. Just, how do we get through FY24?
Yeah.
It is scary, but I don't think that there's a number on my side of the budget, and I'm sure on Whitney and Trey's side of the budget too. I don't think there's a number that I can't justify. I don't have a number in the budget that's just a random $200,000 in revenue that doesn't come back to me. Every number can be justified. It's just on the higher end of where we've been recently.
I understand.
So I don't want you to think that, hey, we're just
No,
throwing numbers out there.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if we have an emergency situation where we have to buy 3 new trooper cars because they wrecked here in Warsaw, we'd be in.
You'd hit your savings account pretty well.
Pretty well.
Pretty well. And that's what I said last week. I mean, the budget, I think,
It's supported, it's just.
is supported, and I think we can get through 24 not going in the red, but it can't handle many unexpected
Crazy things.
$100,000
Exactly.
expenses.
Exactly.
Where are we? Additional questions on the recommended RCPS or that carryover function that we're proposing for the year? All right, debt service. I've kind of hit on that. Just really wanted to make sure that you understood that $116,600 for the FY24 Coggin Furniture Building debt was coming from the fund balance. It's not supported by another revenue in the budget. It's supported by transferring $116,600 from the fund balance to pay that debt for FY24. We've got 2 years left of that debt at $116,600 each year. It would be lovely if in FY25 you can pull that $116,600 from coming from the fund balance. So pull it back into the operational. I'd say it's likely that this debt gets fully satisfied over the next 2 years, pulling it from the fund balance just based off of kind of where things.
Is that a July 1st bill?
We pay that in August.
Okay.
We pay Chris August 15th, I believe, is what we pay him every year. So it's a decent time financially for us. We're getting ready to go back up. It's just I can't support that revenue. All right, last item. Capital improvement plan. Let's see. Can we go back to the PowerPoint? Wanted to just address the contingency of the CIP real quick. I know there have been some concerns about the boat. I guess I want to talk specifically about the boat at this time because I've had several. phone calls from different people over the last week, and even over the last couple of years as we talk about this vote for the county. So I did want to just make some comments on this and just kind of see where we stand on this. And I would agree that if we were able to purchase this boat at some time, the use of the boat would be extremely rare. And really, I hope it's extremely rare. So much of the equipment that the county buys for public safety is rarely used. It's seldom used equipment, but it's equipment that is important to have when we need it. And I want to clear up, I made a comment last week, the number on it's $34,250. And I kind of indicated, and Mr. Thomas called me on this, I kind of indicated that I just pulled that number from the air. It was just a guess. It was not supported by anything. And it's not supported by anything. It's supported by, over the last couple of years, we've looked at pricing on the type of boat that we think would be satisfactory to the county, and that's where the price came from. So yes, I pulled it out of the air after an educated guess based off of what we've seen, and that's kind of what we do on the capital improvement plan. The capital improvement plan is our long-term planning document financially for big expenses, and when we plan for these expenses, we haven't gotten to the point of procurement. We haven't gotten to the point of soliciting actual bids. If you take the chiller, for example, that we're going to be installing this fall for this building, last year at this time, we put $125,000 on it. We just said it's going to cost $125,000. It was a pull from the air number based off of conversations with professionals in that world. That number is going to come in closer to about $110,000. So they're kind of educated guesses. I know there's a concern about how the boat would be managed, how it would be maintained, and I just want to say that when this boat becomes a reality, there will be many rules, regulations, operating procedures, and training requirements that will be in place. Our EMS department is one of, if not the most professional departments in this region when it comes to many different things. And I promise you that if they manage this facility, it would be managed in the exact same way everything else we have currently is managed. This boat is not a towboat. This is not a boat to respond to a boat that's simply run out of gas on the water or an engine has stalled. This is a boat and a rescue apparatus for serious, potentially life or death scenarios that will be beneficial in real situations such as boat accidents, drownings, capsized boats, missing persons in the water, health emergencies, etc. It's not a towboat. We're not going to pick people up that run out of gas. And I guess at this point, I get so passionate about this is because Richmond County, we're a well-run, we're well-organized, and we're a professional county that at current time, we have no resource to get onto the Rappahannock River in any of these emergency situations. We're dependent on the Coast Guard, DGIF, Marine Police, or citizens when we have these rare emergencies that take place, and we should have the ability to take an active part in these events rather than standing on the shoreline with binoculars, waiting for other agencies to respond. At the request of Supervisor Thomas, I have split the funding of this into the next 2 years. So I have split it to $17,000, $500 a year for FY24, $17,500 for FY25, and that's all I have to say about that. Questions or on that funding or the need or the purpose or training?
The only comment I've got, and I didn't mean to stir the pot too much by bringing it back up a couple of months ago, but if Richmond County is responsible for everything from our boundary line over to the Essex County shoreline, we need, like you said, we need to be professional about it, and we need to have something other than you calling me and say, hey, can you slip out there and give these people a hand or something. And whether we do it this year or in the next 2 years or if it takes us 5 years, I just think it ought to be something on our radar that we are working on.
and I'm not in disagreement with working on it, I just, $34,000. Well, 34,000 ain't gonna touch anything anyway. So, but I would recommend that we go ahead and start the training process, we'll get that in the mix. So, that part will be getting there. Regardless if they go on an individual boat or the county-owned rescue vehicle, or fire vessel, I guess we call it. I've always been told if 911 call is dropped, we got to go. That's what I've been told several times. So when I say a towboat, don't want to become a towing vessel. We don't. How are you going to distinguish it? You're only relying on what the people tell you that call it in. The dispatch can only be as good as what they get. And some people's mind, if they're stranded in the water and getting nervous, that's an emergency, regardless of what they need. I just don't think we're going to be able to say that it's going to be used just for, allocated to emergencies of whatever nature other than, I mean, you know, if you're out there and you're struggling, you're struggling.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. And what I would recommend, and I know it would happen, is when this comes, I think Chief Paulette would be able to give you extensive information on how he would propose that the operation be done and how calls are handled in that situation that you're talking about. Because you're right, when somebody's on that Rappahannock River, close to nighttime, calm water, but they run out of gas, that's an emergency to them. And that's not the purpose of what we're proposing here. They should call Keith Whelan or Garrett's or Towboat or Sea Tow or a friend, not the rescue. But how do you differentiate? And that's something that when this time comes, I think Chief Paulette would be able to give you a lot
Do
more
you
information.
think you could get Chief Paulette to come next month with an outline of a plan?
Maybe not next month, but I think Mitch could give you some pretty good information within the next 60 days or 90 days as to what what his vision would be, because he started on that 3 years ago before this got cut based off of COVID. So he should have a lot of that information. But yeah, I'm sure he could get to you by May on a fairly decent presentation on how he managed
I
it.
think it's a good start.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you're gonna do a bunch of training without a budget. Before, but
Imagine a certain amount of in-house classroom training.
I'd like to see what his plan of operations can be, and how he's going to restrict those kind of things.
Now, wasn't there something happened over there last week on the river?
There was a kayak floating out there last week. I know our sheriff's deputies got to the top of the bridge, put eyes on the kayak, pretty much told dispatch, hey, we don't see anyone around it. DGIF will be here when they get here, let them handle it.
Okay.
That was the radio traffic.
Would that have been something we would have responded to if we had something in place?
I would say so, because I guess the event that I think of an event we had last year. I can't remember if it was the fall or the spring. It was a pleasant day outside. It was a little overcast and it was fairly windy. And the report came in down in the Dunsville area of a kayak that had been spotted, empty, turned over in the river, right there near the end of Islington.
Right.
And so for about 4 hours, sheriff's deputies, EMS, volunteer firefighters, myself, some other county staff, I can't remember, pretty much went to the end of every road from Welford's Wharf up to Savin Hall, waiting to see if we saw anything. And I guess that's why I use the terminology, we're standing there with the binoculars, because that's what we were doing last year. We were, there was a threat that there was someone in the water. I think it turned out that I think the boat had probably just washed off of someone's dock.
Okay.
But, we had VMRC coming, we had the Coast Guard helicopter coming, we had the Coast Guard cutter from Gwynn's Island coming. We were treating it as if it was a real emergency.
Right.
So yes, I would say that in an event like that, when there's a report or a 911 call of someone stranded or potentially stranded or a boat flipped over in the river, I would say that would be something that we would deploy to
Okay.
in this, if we had a way to get out there. I mean, last year, I was down at the end of Savin Hall, Carter Welford came out there, we were all the way down at the river at his boat dock, you know, just kind of scanning the river, and he ended up getting in his boat and took one of our paramedics with him,
Okay.
got on the boat with him, and they went out into the Rappahannock for 30 minutes, and Carter didn't have to do that. He was willing to do that, but it was a pretty rough day. I mean, I wouldn't have taken my Carolina skiff out there that day.
Like there's something stuck up there by the bridge now. It's been there for a couple of weeks.
Oh, that
Paddle boat.
Yeah.
Paddle
Now,
boat.
whose responsibility is that to get that out of the way?
I've been waiting to see when it moved.
Yeah.
I thought the high tide last week might get it, but I guess it's not high enough. Yeah, but I've seen, because one of the deputies, Steve Davis, came over the radio and said, hey, there's a paddle boat that's been out there in the marsh for the last 4 weeks. Are we sure we're not talking about this? And
Right.
the dispatcher came on and said, no, it's not the paddle boat that's been there. It's a kayak right under the bridge floating upside down.
You ever been in a paddle boat?
Oh, yeah.
That's why it's still there.
Nobody wants one. Sorry for Bird Park, but not for Rappahannock River.
I think Mitch needs to prepare how he's gonna staff this thing too. Because, you know, that's part of the problem. You can't take people off the line to do that. That's not.
That's a good point. I think our intention has always been to staff it with full-time employees, not full-time, but with our full-time employees and our part-time employees on an on-call basis. And then at some point, we were hoping to be able to get it up and running and then offer to the volunteer fire department to take the required trainings and get certified to do it so that we could combine it to a degree. But that would be something that Mitch could give you his idea on how he envisions this.
Okay.
And that is, that's all I have at this time on the budget.
All right, any more questions? We've got another work session scheduled for next Monday. We don't have anything from the state, probably won't have anything from the state. You want to just go on and cancel that one, but leave the April 10th one? And then if we still don't have anything from the state, I'll just cancel that and then everybody will get a text or something that it's been canceled.
The state goes back on the 12th of April.
Okay.
I just read Margaret's report.
That's fine with me.
Is that,
And that would, yes, I mean, that would give us plenty of time to be advertised by April 27th.
all right.
So no meeting next,
No meeting next week, because I don't think, if there's no more questions on the budget, there's nothing we can do until we get something from the state.
At this point, that's the only thing that I could see changing anything,
Right.
but I don't see it anytime soon.
You straight, Billy?
I'm straight.
Okay. All right, Morgan's got a couple other things he wants
I
to,
have three items of other business. We've run into we've discovered, yeah, I'll give you a, we've discovered a small issue in the past 3 days with our school board selection commission. And I want to just go over this to the extent that you understand it. But we have noted that our school board selection commission has not been reappointed by the circuit court judge since that last term expired July of 2018. Why? Is this the case? Other than it being forgotten by several people, not knowing where the responsibility falls, I can take a little bit of that blame. It needs to be fixed as soon as possible so that the selection commission may begin their appointment process. They've got a term, I believe Ms. Pat Pugh's term expires June 30th, and she is up for reappointment, or another person. What are the consequences of this at this point? They're unknown. Our school board selection commission has made school board appointments in the period of August 1st through 2018, August 1st, 2018 through July 31st of 2021. No appointments were needed in 2022. We met with Rich Golden today. Hope and I did. I know that Dr. Davis and Whitney met with Rich this last week to kind of run over this issue. We've provided you with a listing of the current members, I use the word current, as of their expiration of July 31st, 2018. We have confirmed that all current members still reside in the appropriate districts under the 2021 redistricting map. So everyone that's currently on there conforms with the 2021 map as their district, as the district's level. And as this is a time-sensitive matter, we would ask that you contact these individuals or others to gauge their interest in serving on this commission and be ready by the April 13th meeting to make those recommendations so that they may then be forwarded to the circuit court judge so that an order may be entered and the commission can be recurrent.
There's no terms that the.
4-year terms.
4-year terms. Okay. So they'll be actually signed up for another 4 years.
This would run on through whenever the judge makes that appointment, through, it would probably just restart because we can't fill an unexpired term, it's already expired. So July, it should have been July 1 of 2018. Should have been July 1 of 2018 to June of 2022. So the new term should be July 1 of 22 through June 30 of 25. So, right, am I doing math right? Months in math? I think this would take it from, it should have been July 1, 2022 through June 30, 2025.
2026. I think their term would end July 31st of 2026 because those terms are from August 1 to July 31.
Okay, but I'm backing up. If we were to take it back to 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, you're still right. 23, 24.
25, 26.
We'll figure that out.
But they won't start till the judge signs them, so it'll be
Correct.
4 years from his signature, right?
I guess.
No matter, I mean, we're already out of whack with it anyway. I mean, we go try backing it up and,
And none of these were staggered with the board of supervisors, right?
No, sir.
Okay, if one says they don't want to do it, then we gotta be on the ball to get somebody else quicker.
Yes, sir. All, to my knowledge, all 5 of these people believe that they're on the school board selection commission and would probably stay on the school board selection.
just don't ask them and just reappoint them.
You have that option. You can do that tonight, and I could get the order to the judge tomorrow, and we could get this remedied tomorrow if you wanted to in that way. But if you want to ask them, we need to know it by April 13th at the latest.
So just say I was lucky enough to get it in 2-3 days, call you and say, hope that this is, they're on board, then I gotta we need to bring it to the meeting.
You need to bring it, I guess you would probably need it
Make a
back as a
motion.
recommendation, and then all 5 names would be submitted at one time. We wouldn't submit one at a time. So, that's item 1. Item 2, we have a 2007 F-150 pickup truck that needs to be officially declared surplus. I do not have the VIN number with me. It's a F-150 white single cab former animal control truck that has been replaced by our new maintenance truck. And I would ask that that be
What year is it?
2007, I believe. Run sometime.
You need a motion?
Yes, sir.
So moved.
If there's no discussion, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? I can dates clear back to Kim Lindbergh, doesn't it?
Yep.
It runs sometimes.
Run sometimes, right?
Take the sheriff's department.
This
It's
is,
gonna be busy.
this is our last
Can't be
little
grilling it, it'll look like a brand new.
item of business, I would ask. These are the appointments that need to be made for our interim county administrator effective 4/3/2023. Middle Peninsula Juvenile Detention Facility, Northern Neck Regional Jail Board, Bay Consortium Workforce Development, Clio Board, Richmond County CPMT, ex officio of Department of Social Services, ex officio Richmond County Public Library, member of the Northern Neck Ambulance Recovery Board, authority to sign county checks. We've already started the process of turning check registers, and we'll be calling several of you for new signatures, and then the designation of Richmond County Emergency Services Deputy Director, Richmond County Emergency Services Deputy Coordinator.
Motion.
Whoa. Some of these membership things, is it somebody that could take one or two of those things that wouldn't upset, just
So,
trying to lighten the load right off the, getting slammed in it, I
juvenile
mean, it's not,
detention-
that's fine, but I'm just,
All right, well, let me just explain. Richmond County Department of Social Services is an ex officio, and Richmond County Public Library is an ex officio. I haven't been to either of those meetings in 6 years. Because it was just kind of the way of just kind of having.
right, well, it still leaves a rather long list.
The Middle Peninsula Juvenile Detention Facility, I think, is an important commission that
Okay,
should be on, obviously, the jail board. Now, the Bay Consortium Workforce Development Board, CLEO, stands for Chief Local Elected Officials. This really should or could be a board member. Y'all appointed me as your CLEO designee back when this board was created 4 years ago, and I've been the chairman of it for the last 4 or 5, whenever the board was created. So this board consists of both administrators and board of supervisors, members from different local governments. So a board member is welcome to take CLEO back. It's actually twice a year. It's really not intensive. And in the Northern Neck Ambulance Recovery Board is EMS recovery. That's a quarterly meeting. Really, your jail and your juvenile detention. Your jail is your most intensive one here, and your juvenile detention, if you're not on the executive commissions, every quarter. So it's probably okay the way it is.
okay.
I
As long as
I think it's longer than it really is.
okay. I'm just asking.
So we need a
Sink
Oh,
or
what?
swim,
Yeah,
folks.
but- huh?
Sink or swim.
You think we ought to take these memberships and the checks and then the EMS, take them as 3 separate things, or?
Sure. I think you're fine doing
I'm
that.
asking a question.
I think we do it all at once.
I don't think it really matters. I think split out the checks if you want to. If you want to split out the checks, the authority to sign checks, and then do the emergency services and the commissions and boards together.
Okay,
Separate checks.
all right, let's do it that way then.
So moved.
For what?
Or what, just do all of them except for the authority to sign.
Okay. Did you get that, Ted? Okay. All right, if there's no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
So
Now,
moved
check
with the
signing.
authority to sign checks.
Okay, thank you, Bill. If there's no discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Right, we'll see. All right, you have anything else?
No, sir.
Does anybody else on the board have anything else?
I do. I had a
I
citizen
know,
asked me
you
if wanted to do being put on the agenda, but he want to do it by Zoom. What do we have to do? Or is that something he has to do in person?
Does he want to present at the meeting by Zoom, or does he want to speak as public comment?
No, meeting. He wants to put on the agenda a topic that he wants to address. And could he do that by Zoom, or does he have to be in person?
Well, I guess we'd want to know in advance
Yeah.
what he'd want on the agenda, and I could definitely work with him to have Zoom capability.
Okay. That will be coming. I'll let him, but he's going to give you information on what he wants to do based on agenda. But I think he's working, he's trying to do a timing thing to make it work so he can do it, I guess, off his phone or whatever his capabilities are.
Okay, if you just have him give me a call, and I
And
can
is
work
there
it
a
out.
time frame which he needs to get on the agenda for advertising purposes and anything like that?
Well, I would most likely do the agenda the week before the meeting, and so as long as I had it, you know, in a week in advance.
Okay, I'll let him present to you what he's got on his mind, and then, and then you and him can cover the Zoom thing and work out what's best for him to have to present it and do.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? If not, we are adjourned.
Recessed until April 10th,
When's our next meeting?
13th.
13th, all right, then we in
If we don't
recess.
meet, we'll have to cancel.
Okay. We in recess until the 10th.
Is that 6 o'clock on the 10th?